Have the Louisville Cardinals found one of their starting guards for 2023-24? On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're going to talk about new Louisville commit, Illinois transfer Skyy Clark will start for the Louisville Cardinals next season. With that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to thank you all personally for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. The Louisville men's basketball team has a new commitment, Illinois transfer Skyy Clark. We're going to talk about why I believe he will start next season. We'll also talk about two new players that the Cardinals have reached out to and would be solid additions. That is Vanderbilt transfer Myles Stute and Bryant transfer Charles Pride. So we'll begin with the big news on Thursday evening. Illinois transfer Skyy Clark committed to the Louisville program just days after he officially entered the transfer portal and announced that he would be visiting the Cardinals program. Now, Clark is no stranger to Kenny Payne and the Cardinals. He listed Louisville in his final six before seemingly deciding between Louisville and Illinois. But ultimately, once Clark hits the portal, it's no secret that there would be interest from Louisville and vice versa. A visit is lined up very quickly. He's on campus on Tuesday, and then 2 days later, a commitment comes from a former five-star prospect, continuing that momentum from earlier on in the week, adding some more help for next season. On Sunday, the Cardinals program picked up a commitment from 7'1", 2023 top 20 prospect Dennis Evans. There was also talks of Louisville being trending for 2024 five-star prospect Trenton Flowers, who makes his commitment on Friday, and then making the final two for Carter Bryant, a top 5 player in the 2024 class. But Skyy Clark, now a Cardinal. Louisville is up to 13 filled scholarships currently up to date. So no more spots available at the moment, but you would assume that more spots are going to fill up. This shouldn't really surprise anyone. I think that this was probably one of those things. Obviously, Skyy Clark's name had been tossed around by Louisville fans over the past couple months when he took his leave of absence from Illinois, and there were some rumblings that he may transfer out. A lot of people thought, well, Skyy Clark would be a solid guard for Louisville. Now, granted, I will say this. I don't know why he stepped away. He played 13 games, started 12 of them for the Fighting Illini this past season before stepping away from the program due to personal reasons. This is not the show that you can come to and expect me to fuel the speculation. I don't know why he stepped away. I have no clue, and I'm not even going to start, playing the hypotheticals or anything like that or trying to guess what it could be because it's none of my business. I hope at this point whatever he stepped away for is being handled or has been handled, and he's in a better place mentally than he was when he stepped away, but that's all you can hope for. I think personally Skyy Clark will start for the Louisville men's basketball team for a handful of reasons next season. Number one, guard availability. At this point in time, there are 13 filled scholarships for Louisville going into next year. Granted, some more spots are going to open up. I mean, you're probably thinking guys like maybe Jalen Withers, Roosevelt Wheeler, some other players are going to enter the portal, opening up some spots. But as of right now, you look at the positions, you look at the roster breakdown. If L. Ellis does not come back, then Skyy Clark is the only true guard on the roster. Outside of, sure, you can say guys like Karan Davis or Mike James or whoever it may be are guards, but I really argue that they're more wings than guards. And even if you do classify them as guards, they're not point guards. Skyy Clark, some believe he's more of a smaller two guard, being 6'3", but still, I think he has that ability to handle the basketball, the ability to facilitate, has shown that promise of facilitating. So I think he would be the only facilitator on the team. Reason number one, I think availability. I think the notion that he is one of the only guards on the team would almost kind of have him be a pencil in for the starting roster. But I think that you can't just look at it that way. I think he's talented enough to be a starter as well. This past season for Illinois, 7 points per game, 3.7 rebounds per game, 2 assists. I will say Illinois fans were not necessarily as high on Clark as a lot of Louisville fans project to be. I think that a lot of Illinois fans, judging by what they've said, Skyy Clark played better against worse competition. So when you look at his game logs, I mean, that pretty much checks out. He scored in double figures in 1, 2, 3, 4 of his games, and only one of them was against one of them was against a ranked team. 2 were against Power 5. Scored 11 against Penn State. Scored 10 against UCLA, but his career high against 19 comes to Lindenwood, who I believe is an FCS or a D2 team. And then Kansas City, he had 10 points, but there were some other games where he didn't necessarily do that well. 1 for 6 against Northwestern, 4 for 4 against Missouri. Let's see, only 2 for 5 against Texas. 0 for 10 against Syracuse down in the Jimmy V Classic, so on and so forth. So I think that as good as Skyy Clark, I think he can be. I think that some of what Illinois fans are he is talented, but really wasn't able to put it together. Now, granted, he was a true freshman. I have my doubts as to whether or not he was fully healthy and rehabilitated from that ACL tear that he had been dealing with his senior year of high school. So I think that that's one thing I'm looking to see now is he going to be fully healthy? Was he fully healthy from that? It's yet to be seen. I think that I would caution Louisville fans to believe that he's going to be like a lottery pick next year or anything, because I think that there is some risk because, he averaged 7 points per game. But, if you were expecting him to make the jump and be, Louisville's go-to guy and leading scorer, I think that, there's a lot of reward and risk potential. I think that Skyy Clark has a ton of talent. We've seen that. We've seen that 3-level scoring ability. We've seen the facilitation ability, being 6'3", 200 pounds, utilizes his size really well. I think his defensive upside is something we need to focus on as well. I think that as long as the effort's there, which at most times at Illinois, he was very attentive on the defensive end. Had some trouble blowing by his man last season, but I wonder, was that due to the reason of, not being fully healthy? We don't know, but he can create his own shots and he can shoot the ball from deep. That's something that Louisville struggled with last season as a whole. I will say at this point, though, I was really surprised by how much Illinois fans were absolutely going at Skyy Clark on social media on Thursday evening. I understand that they just lost the NCAA tournament, but to see the masses just go at Skyy Clark and just talk about how bad he was, and I'm thinking, okay, the way they're talking about him, you would have think he averaged 0.0 points per game. And I understand that doesn't represent the majority of the Illinois fan base, and I'm not, singling out Illinois because there is a portion of Louisville fans that do that, don't necessarily say nice things to guys that transfer out. I think that you're rarely ever going to see a program whose player is leaving and going somewhere else going to speak highly of said player. But I was just really appalled by the amount of negativity in the comment section on Twitter and stuff like that. That just really, really wowed me. So I don't necessarily think that all that's true, that Illinois fans are saying that he's just so bad, that he's not that good, that, all he did was beat up on bad teams, that he showed no promise, because I just don't agree. I watched probably about 4 to 5 games in which he did play because I was curious to see how he would look. Sure, I think he has a lot to work on. He has a lot to grow in his game, but he has that potential. And if this coaching staff can get him on the pathway of, being a lead guard at the collegiate level consistently, I think that he's going to be in a good spot. Obviously, there's some concern as to him bouncing around high school to high school and now transferring in college. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to look too much into it at this point in time. Hopefully, it's a move that bodes well for both parties. I think it will. Skyy Clark comes to a prestigious university. Or a prestigious program, I should say, a top 5 to 7 college basketball program of all time, which some people who don't ever watch Louisville over the past 40 years will say it's not, but I don't care. Playing at Louisville with the coaching staff that he's familiar with in offense that he's going to have a lot of priority with, and a lot of production possibility as well. So I like this move for both parties, and I think he's going to be starting for the Cardinals next season. So, but like I said, I think that with Louisville going after more players along with Skyy Clark, it shows that there's going to be some more roster turnover. We're going to talk about 2 players that the Cardinals have recently reached out to that I think would be solid options. One of them is Vanderbilt transfer Myles Stute. We'll talk about him here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. We're about a month left of the regular season of the NBA, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe and secure and super easy to use. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance for a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. As many of you know, I'm a big Rockets fan who we just beat the Los Angeles Lakers 2 nights ago. I was on FanDuel just a couple minutes before the game, kind of seeing what they had available. And it was just awesome to see how many exclusive bets they have all across the board. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back when you go FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Grab your bracket and go listen to the Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown. The NCAA tournament is in full effect now with national analysis and the insights from our local experts. The Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown has everything you need to make the most informed decisions on your bracket. Find the episode on Locked On College Basketball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Okay, moving right on along into the second segment of the show, we're going to talk about the first of 2 recent players that the Cardinals reached out to via the transfer portal that I believe would be solid options for next year's team. The first one is Myles Stute, the transfer from Vanderbilt. Played 3 seasons at Vanderbilt in his 3 years, started 59 games, averaged a career high in minutes this past year. This past season, 8.4 points per game while shooting 35% from the field, 36% from behind the arc, and 67% from the free throw line. 4.6 rebounds, which is a career high, to go on with 0.6 assists, 0.6 steals, and 0.1 blocks. Averages just about 1.3 turnovers per game as well. So Stute, the 6'7" junior from the Washington, D.C. area, plays more like a wing, and he has had a long list of suitors that have reached out over the past couple days since he has entered the portal. Nebraska, Iowa, VCU, Seton Hall, Georgia, Pittsburgh, Arkansas, Miami, A&M, just to name a couple. So as we talked about a transfer last week who had really only gotten some interest from mid-major schools, no shortage of Power 5 schools in line to get an opportunity to recruit Myles Stute. Stute having started multiple games, a plethora of games actually at the Power 5 level. Vanderbilt's coaching staff essentially said that Myles Stute wanted the opportunity to have a larger role on offense, to be more than just a shooter, which Myles Stute is basically, in my opinion, a solid 3-and-D wing. What I mean by that, for those who aren't familiar with the terminology, 3-and-D is they shoot the ball well from behind the arc and they're solid defensively. I don't necessarily think that Myles Stute is going to transfer somewhere and be a primary creator I think he has solid handles, and he's shown the ability at times. I mean, you watch the games that Vanderbilt's played. Stute has shown the ability to put the ball on the deck and get to the rim, the ability to create his shot in the mid-range, although it's not something that he does often or really honestly efficiently. When you look at the field goal percentage being what it is, 35% from the field, he's mainly a 3-and-D player. He's a wing that you're going to recruit if you are hurting in the perimeter shooting and the defense categories, which, spoiler alert, Louisville is hurting in both. So I like this. I would like this possible addition for the Cardinals for the reasons of it fitting needs for the Cardinals rather than, you banking on star potential. Because as much as Louisville needs those players that can be priority, options in terms of scoring, I don't think that you're going to go to the portal and get 5 players of that caliber. Right now, the addition of Skyy Clark, you're sitting at 13 scholarships. You can make the argument that, okay, Dalton, you say that they need a couple of those, productive scores. Well, if they're only going to clear a certain amount of more spots, they still need to go out and get those scores. I agree. I definitely agree. But I think that if you were to add either one of these 2 players we're talking about, and actually Charles Pride probably fits the mold of one of those priority scorers that we talked about, but Myles Stute can fit a role here at Louisville that Louisville desperately needs. They need perimeter shooting. You look at the team right now. You look at what they're, looking at next season. Skyy Clark has the ability to knock down the deep ball, but I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying he's a great shooter, being 33% from the field. If Jalen Withers stays, which I'm not sure he does, he can shoot the deep ball. Same with JJ Traynor, who I think can shoot the deep ball. You have a lot of players that can shoot on the team, but they're not shooters. I don't look at one player that could possibly be coming back and think, okay, he is going to be a knockdown shooter. You need guys that can shoot the ball from deep, especially with Louisville's playing style. It seems like it would benefit with the ability to have, shooters from deep. Myles Stute does not need a lot of space to shoot the basketball. He is a high volume perimeter shooter, 36% from the field on 6 attempts per game, 43% the year prior on attempts per game. I mean, those are very, very solid numbers. You can't refute that. He's a very, very solid shooter. Not necessarily huge on creating his own shot behind the arc, but does a great job of, being a spot-up guy in the corner, outside on the perimeter, having guys take it to the basket and then kick it out. I think that would have really boded well for Louisville this past year, but unfortunately there weren't many players that could consistently shoot the ball well from behind the arc for the Cardinals in 2022-23 season, but possible addition. Defensively, I think, with his length, 6'7", 215-pound frame, he's a plus-level defender, hence the 3-and-D term. I think his ability to switch anywhere from 2 through 4, I like his on-ball defense, and I like his ability to, not get caught ball watching, does a good job of guarding, movement near the basket and under the basket, near the baseline, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that's just something that Louisville had struggled with all season. So I think that this possible addition would be one squarely based upon filling needs. And yes, scoring responsibilities are filling needs, but make no mistake about it. If Myles Stute can give you a production like he gave Vanderbilt over the past couple seasons, where over the past 2 years, he averaged over 8 points per game. If you can get that same level of production, if you're the Cardinals, you have to feel good about it. If you're getting over 35% on over 5 attempts from behind the arc and solid defensive play, it's a no-brainer addition for the Cardinals program. Now, granted, for Stute, I think that, there's a log jam right now at the wing position. You have to wonder, okay, am I going to get those opportunities? Well, that is yet to be seen. I do think that, he'd probably be in line to start games. I think he's a guy that if he's not starting, he's a 6-man right off the bench, because I really don't see a situation to where he would come to Louisville if he wasn't promised a starting position, just based upon, my thoughts and my intuition. So I would like this possible addition. It would make a lot of sense for the Cardinals. I'm not sure how, feasible or plausible this possible move is. I guess we will see if a visit is scheduled. So, but for the remainder of the show, we'll talk about another guy who has entered the transfer portal that the Cardinals have reached out to, Bryant guard Charles Pride. We'll do that here in just a second. Here, after we talk about some solid news. This past week has been a big week for the Locked On Louisville podcast, continually rising up the viewers numbers. We are over, I think, 1,200 subscribers on YouTube now, so very, very thankful for that, very grateful. I can't express my gratitude enough for you all that are listening, watching, subscribing, rating, sharing the podcast on whatever streaming service and social media platform you do it on. I appreciate that a ton. So, but one segment left on today's episode of the show. We just talked about Myles Stute. The Cardinals reached out to him. They also reached out to Bryant veteran guard Charles Pride. Pride currently hearing from Arkansas, Rhode Island, Loyola, Chicago, and San Francisco. So sort of a recent phenomenon. I think he entered the portal in the last 24 to 48 hours. 6'4", 200-pound native of Syracuse, New York. Played 4 seasons with the Bryant Bulldogs and was an absolutely phenomenal player for the past 4 seasons. Started as a freshman, 15 of the 29 games, averaging 8 points per game. Every season after that, double-figure scoring. 13.7 as a sophomore, 17.7 as a junior, and then this year saw a little bit of a step back in production, 14.6 points per game. But statistically speaking, solid numbers. If you don't know, the 50-40-90 club is elite when it comes to field goal percentage. So 50% field goal, 40% from behind the arc, and 90% from the free throw line. Charles Pride is very close to that. 45% from the field while averaging 11 shots per game. 37% from behind the arc on 5 attempts per game. And 85% from the free throw line to go with 6.1 rebounds and 2.4 assists, 1.3 steals. There is the question of, okay, he comes from a mid-major, so is he going to be able to translate that production to the Power 5? And that's always a good question. That is the number one question, is can you replicate that? I'm not sure if he can replicate it, but you look at what he's done. Looking at the competition that he faced this season, had 13 points at Syracuse, had 23 and a loss to Cincinnati. Trying to look at the big-time games that he's played over the past couple of seasons against solid competition. Against Clemson, only had 8 points. He was 2 of 10 from the field. Against Houston, 1 of 10 from the field, 2 points. They lost 111-44. Had 9 points against Cincinnati. Saw most of his production in conference play where he had a bunch of 30-point games, 44 against St. Francis, Pennsylvania, 24 against Fairleigh Dickinson, who's a 16 seed. And they actually made the NCAA tournament last year at a 13-point game in the first 4, and then actually, let's see, no, had 8 points in the first 4, lost to Wright State. So not a ton of production against big-time opponents the year prior, 15 against Syracuse, and it looks like that's probably going to be all it is. So, I mean, you have to really determine whether or not that's going to translate. I think he does a good job of utilizing his frame, 6'4", 200 pounds, ability to handle the basketball. Played more so, I would say, handled the ball a lot for Bryant, probably because he had to. But I think probably projects to be a shooting guard at the next level, a secondary ball handler. So I think he would be able to coexist in the backcourt with a player like Skyy Clark. Does a good job of putting the ball on the floor and getting to the rim, utilizing his size, finishing through contact. And then you see the three-point percentage on 5 attempts per game. He does a good job of creating his own shot. Was pretty much, the heartbeat of this Bryant offense, and for good measure, obviously. But I think that, let's see, actually over the past couple of seasons, because this year it was a little bit more of a balanced approach. You had Doug Adert. Oh gosh, why am I drawing a blank? Peacocks, the team that went to the Elite Eight. Why can't I remember who that is? Why am I St. Peter's? Duh. Sharif Gross Bullock averaged 17.1 points per game this past season after transferring in from LaSalle. Earl Timberlake from Miami also transferred in. So I think, he would probably be brought in as a scorer. You have to wonder, it seems like Arkansas reaches out to every possible transfer in the portal. Is he a guy that can translate that skill set over to the Power 5 level? I'm not sure. He's had some respectable games. I think that, it would be a risk. I think he has the scoring ability to probably be solid at the Power 5 level, and Louisville is really not in too big of a situation to be able to turn down that level of guard play. But, there is a real need to be in the tournament next year if you are the Cardinals. I think Pride would be a solid addition. Could he be a double-digit scorer at the ACC level? Sure. I think he's a veteran player that, was probably a type of player that Louisville fans wish that the Cardinals would have gotten in the last offseason ahead of this year. But I digress. That's water under the bridge. I think he'd be a solid addition as well. I think, solid on-ball defense, but also, filling some of that scoring responsibility that you're going to have to, especially if L. Ellis does not come back. So, basically, I think that Myles, Stute, Charles Pride, I'm not sure how likely it is that they come to Louisville. It's still in the early stages, but we know that there is interest from the Cardinals who have reached out. So we'll continue to monitor those situations. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here very soon.